We're doing two series back to back that are going to follow our children's curriculum. So whatever they're studying in the back, the text that they're going to study in the back for the older kids, so like kindergarten and older, we're going to study the same text in here because we want to help build disciples and give you an opportunity to help build disciples in your own home, all right? And so we have created some questions that are in your seat. So these cards are for you to take home, and this is an opportunity. This is very similar to the parent cue that some of you parents may already get in paper form, or you may be using the Parent Cue app. But these are for you to take home with you today. And so they're just some conversation starters. So maybe today at lunch, or tomorrow morning on the way to school, or this evening when you're getting them ready for bed. Just ask one of these questions and have a conversation about it, because they're going to have read and had a lesson around the same exact text that you would have had a sermon from today. And we're going to do that for the next 8 weeks. So this 8 weeks is going to be called Live Bright. And we're talking about compassion in the life of a believer. Now, some of you are like, well, I don't have kids. This is how do I do this? So what we want to do is create common conversations. And so maybe you keep this in your purse and you work with somebody who comes to church here, or just you and your husband or wife, and you want to have a conversation. We want to extend the message. You see, the goal is for the message to be longer than just 30 or 40 minutes. Because if it's only 30 or 40 minutes, I haven't done my job. The goal is to get you to have a conversation about it. So whatever circles you're in, this is an opportunity for you to have a conversation about what's taking place. And so there'll be one of these in your seat every Sunday. The questions are different. The questions on this page are just for today. All right, they're just for the sermon today. And so I hope you'll use them. Maybe you have a grandchild or a neighbor's whose kids come here, or you just want to have a conversation with other adults. You can do that. That's our goal, because our goal is to help make us disciples and help make other disciples, just like I just said. And so we're going to extend that to the family for the next couple of weeks or next couple of months. Now, they have a memory verse every month, and this is especially important for parents. All right, and their memory verse this month is this: in the same way, let your light shine so others can see it, the Live Bright concept. Then they will see the good things you do, and they will bring glory to your Father who is in heaven. And so we're going to talk about this concept of compassion, and today we're going to talk about this concept of more than enough, that you have more than enough. Whether you realize it or not, whether you think that or not, whether you believe that or not, you already have more than enough. Sometimes things that are more than enough are either accidental or messy, or we weren't prepared for it, right? So I see this with food, and most common food that I see this with is sushi. You ever taken somebody to get sushi for the very first time, and they put it in their mouth, and the longer they chewed it, it felt like the bigger it got? Right? And you're like, where did I put the whole fish in my mouth? There's some other foods maybe you have that way, and you've put it in your mouth and like, I shouldn't have put this in my mouth. And, you want to spit it out, but you're not in a place you can spit it out, so you chew it. And the more you chew it, you're like, it just gets. A few weeks back, I talked about spilling the athletic greens, and how for days we found powder, everywhere. It's like, where did all this powder come from? How did that happen? Right? That happened to us this week. Now, let me tell you something Barbara and I are good at, especially when we're off by ourselves on vacation. That is laughing. We laugh at each other. We laugh at other people. We just like to laugh. So one of the travel perks that we got on this trip, and we get this, it's a status thing. They bring us a plate of chocolates to the room, and it's usually 2 macaroons, 2 chocolate balls, and 4 chocolate-covered strawberries. Barbara loves chocolate-covered strawberries. If you ever want to know what to get her, like as a gift, you can get chocolate-covered strawberries, and you always win, right? She loves chocolate-covered strawberries. So she's in the bathroom getting ready, when they deliver them to the room. Now, I don't know if y'all ever have done things like they do in the movies, thinking it's going to be romantic, right? And it don't turn out exactly that way, right? And so anyway, she came out of the bathroom, and I had a chocolate-covered strawberry, and I put it in her mouth, and she bit it. And it squirted strawberry juice all in my face. See, look at her. She's dying laughing right there. And I flinched. And when I flinched, that made it worse. And she got so tickled. She spit chocolate-covered strawberries from my head to my toe. I mean, like she covered me in chocolate. I mean, I am wiping it off my face, out of my ears. I'm wiping it off my feet. I'm getting it off my pants. Well, after about 15 minutes, I think I'm good, and we're still laughing, right? You know, and I go to lay down on the bed, which is all white, you know, all white sheets. And I lay down, and we're still laughing, and I get up, and when I look down, there is like a body imprint of chocolate. I'm like, how did I get chocolate on my back? Like I was just standing to you face to face, right? And it felt like for hours that I was picking strawberries out of my eyeballs and my ears and my fingernails, you know, and I was like, how many strawberries did you have in your mouth, right? It was just one. And sometimes that happens. And most of the time when that happens and where we go, it's like sand in a kid's shoe, you know, it's like, have you got the whole beach in your shoes? Where did all this sand come from? Most of the time when we have more than what we thought, it's not a positive thing. But this story is a story about where it looks like there's not going to be enough, and suddenly there is enough. You see, the question comes about what is enough. You see, for some reason, there are certain things that we won't do because we don't think it's enough. We don't think it's good enough. We don't think we have enough. We don't think there will be enough. And we don't think if we do it, it's going to make any difference in the world. And so we choose to hold on to what we have because it doesn't look like what we have is going to make any difference at all. It could be our gift. It could be our talent. It could be our abilities. It could be our opinion. It could be our effort. It could be our time. It could be our money. All of those things, what happens to most of us is we go, this isn't enough to make a difference, so I'm not going to do anything at all. And the challenge for each of us is to learn how to take what we have and allow God to use it for His glory so that He can multiply it in ways that we never could. And if we hold on to it, we're going to find out it has limitations. But if we give it to Him, we'll find that there are some things that can happen. There's two things I want to talk to you about today. The first one is this: there are always needs. There's never going to be a time until eternity comes and we're with Christ forever where there aren't going to be needs around us, right? You don't have to look very far. You don't have to even be some kind of visionary to be able to see all of the needs that are in the world, whether it's poverty or abuse or division or addiction or discrimination. We see all of those things in the world. As a matter of fact, I'm reminded what Jesus said when the woman came and washed his feet with the alabaster box of oil, the alabaster oil, and then she wiped it with her hair. And Judas speaks up and said, hey, we could have used this money to feed the poor. And Jesus' response is, you'll always have the poor. And every time I read that, I think about the fact that if we open our eyes, there will always be needs. There's never going to come a time when we've checked every box and we've solved every problem. And so all we have to do is stop and scan the area and we'll see quickly that there are needs. So in this story, in John chapter 6, it says this: after this, Jesus crossed over to the far side of the Sea of Galilee, also known as the Sea of Tiberias. A huge crowd kept following him wherever he went because they saw his miraculous signs as he healed the sick. Then Jesus climbed on a hill and sat down with his disciples around him. Now, there's a couple of things I want to say about this before I go any further. One, for me, passages like this have the benefit of traveling to Israel helps me easily understand passages like this where they would have been a challenge before. All right. One, when we think Sea of Galilee, if you think Jesus went to the other side of the sea, the first thing you think, man, that's a long way, right? And then when you think 20,000 people followed him, that must have been a big boat. Right? And those are the two things you think. And put it in context, today, probably the largest cruise ship in the world, crew and people, will hold 10,000 people. Right? And so what happened when I went to Israel and I got to the Sea of Galilee, which was one of the most eye-opening places that I went in the whole place. It was smaller than Lake Phelps. Right? Like you can see all the way around it from one side. It's really a lake. Okay, that's what it is. It's not a sea. We wouldn't call it a sea. Typically, normally in our context, it's more like a lake, and you can see all sides. And so Jesus got in a boat to go across to the other side. There may not have been, probably weren't enough boats for everybody to follow him, so they followed him on foot. And when you stand on the side of the Sea of Galilee, you can see how that would have been possible. That he would have went to the other side on boat, but they could have walked and arrived there to follow him. And it says a huge crowd kept following him wherever he went because they saw his miraculous signs as he healed the sick. There were two kinds of people that were following Jesus. The first kind were the people that had a need, and the second kind were the people who wanted to see those needs met, right? It was almost like this spectacular show that was happening. And so the people, the lame, the cripple, the blind, the deaf, they were all coming to Jesus and he was healing them. And then there were other people who were coming along just to see Jesus heal those people's needs. Now, there are going to be some times where Jesus scatters them. He's going to preach messages that would be difficult for them to hear, and he's going to run them off. But in this case, Jesus seems to at least be okay with people following him for two things. They have a need, or they want to see him meet needs. If you go back to the memory verse that the kids are using this month, it is, let your light so shine before men and do your deeds for the world to see so that God can be glorified. There are still two things that will draw people to Jesus regularly: great needs and great deeds. Those two things will still draw people to Jesus. And sometimes we try to make everything so spiritual, right? But when people have a great need, the church can be a blessing to them. They will be more receptive to the message of Jesus than at any other time in their life. As a matter of fact, like when the economy tanks or the country's in trouble, the two places where attendance goes up are the church. What's the other one? The bar. Right. They either pray it away or they drink it away. One of the two things happens. They're seeking spirits. Don't ever miss that. People in need are seeking some spirits, and they're either going to drink the spirit or they're going to seek the spirit, but they're looking for it. You go back to 2008 when the economy tanked and places were going out of business. The places whose revenue went up the most were bars. Right? Because people were buying alcohol. They were trying to drink their problems away. And so the two things that will consistently draw people to Jesus are great needs and great deeds. And so when we meet great needs with great deeds, it draws people to him. And at this point, Jesus seems to be fine with it. As a matter of fact, he even acknowledges that there's a need in the room, and he needs to pay attention to it. In verse 4, it says, and it was nearly the time for the Jewish Passover celebration. Jesus soon saw a huge crowd of people coming to look for him. Turning to Philip, he asked, where can we buy bread to feed all these people? He was testing Philip, for he already knew what he was going to do. The first thing that Jesus understood here is these people are hungry, and hungry people don't listen good. Right? That's why y'all start looking at your watch when it gets close to 12. Because hungry people don't listen good. And he understood. This is the Savior of the world. There couldn't have been a better communicator in all of history, right? He could have done whatever he wanted to do, but he realized the people he was talking to needed physical food just as much as they needed spiritual food. And if we're not careful in the church, we will make everything so spiritual that we miss somebody's physical need. There's a reason why they call it hangry. Right? It's because it messes with you. When you're hungry, it starts to mess with you. And so Jesus recognizes there's a problem, that they need some food, and there's a physical need that needs to be met. So he turns to Philip and he says, where can we buy bread to feed all these people? He was testing Philip, for he already knew what he was going to do. I don't know about you, but this bothers me. If he knew what he was going to do, why didn't he just do what he was going to do instead of messing with Philip? Do you ever feel like the Lord's messing with you? He clearly does. Right? There are times I go, he is messing with me. Right? He already knew what he was going to do. I'd rather you just, if you know what you're going to do, say it. Right? Don't make me guess. Right? If I ask my wife where you want to eat and she knows where she wants to eat, don't tell me I don't know. Don't make me just start guessing. You're setting me up. Right? Just say it, right? Why didn't Jesus just tell him what he was going to do? Instead, he says, where can we buy some food to feed all of these people? Why was Jesus asking him this question? Because there was a physical need that had to be met. And the thing we always have to know is that people have physical needs, and the church has to be aware of them. And there are times when we need to be intentional about solving those physical needs, because they're not going to hear what we've got to say until they get that need solved. The person that I first heard say this was Zig Ziglar. I've heard a lot of other people claim this quote. It probably even precedes Ziglar. But he's the first person I ever heard use it. He said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And what he was saying was, if somebody's hungry and you try to get them saved, you're going to miss an opportunity. If you would feed them a meal, then they might hear about Jesus. Right? Because it is hangry for a reason, right? And so there are always going to be needs, and we have to be aware of the needs that are around us. But here's the second thing that I want you to know today. We have something to offer. Every single one of us in this building has something to offer. It may be a different place, a different time, a different way. It may be a different situation. All of us can't do the same thing in the same way. God didn't even design us all to do the same thing in the same way. The question is, are you going to do what you were designed to do? Don't try to force me to do what you were designed to do. You do what you were designed to do, and I'll do what I was designed to do, and I'm going to give it to God to help him, to allow him to use it in a way that only he can. I am convinced that our effectiveness in a situation is going to be affected a lot by the faith with which we approach it. You see, there are problems everywhere. It doesn't take a lot of I want to say this right, so I'm searching for the right words. Fault finding is a low-skill job. Anybody can find fault, right? You don't need an education, a degree. You don't need vision. Anybody can find fault. Trust me. Finding solutions, though, requires some guts, some faith, some willingness to try some things that might be challenging or different. If we look around, we can see all of the problems that are there. The question is, how are we going to respond? And are we going to use what we have for God's glory? He says, the story goes on and says this, Philip replied, even if we worked for months, we wouldn't have enough money to feed them. Then Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. There's a young boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what good is that with this huge crowd? Now, I want to point out 2 different profiles here in this couple of verses. As a matter of fact, when before I left my office before first service this morning, the thing I wrote in my journal was, I want to at least have the faith of Andrew. Right? Philip's response was, if all of us worked for months, we wouldn't have enough. What are you talking about? We can't feed everybody. Andrew's over here going, I'm not exactly sure how you're going to do it, but I at least need to let you know there's a sack lunch. Right? There's I at least need to say there's 5 loaves and 2 fish. Listen, I know that seems like it doesn't take a lot of faith, but that takes a lot of faith. It's just to be able to be willing to speak up and say, hey, I've got this. Because imagine the context here. There's 20,000 people. There's 5,000 men, probably 20,000 plus with women and children that are all hungry. And his response is, I got 5 loaves and 2 fish. How much faith did at least he have to speak up and say, I don't know how you're going to do this, because that's what he says. What good is that with this crowd? But he had the faith to at least say, I think there are some possibilities here. I think there's something that can happen. Look, he had seen Jesus walk on water. He had seen Jesus raise the dead and heal the sick. He had seen him open blinded eyes. He had seen him make the deaf be able to hear and the mute be able to speak. He had seen that happen. And he wasn't exactly sure what Jesus could do with 5 loaves and 2 fish. But he needed to speak up and say, here, I've at least got this. God help me to have the faith that says, God, I don't know what you're going to do with what I've got, but here it is. Let's at least try offering it up to him. Here, God, do with it what you can. The story goes on like this. Jesus said, tell everyone to sit down. So they all sat down on the grassy slopes. The men alone numbered about 5,000. Then Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks to God, and distributed them to the people. Now, this piece right here, I think, is important. One, this is one of the passages where it would lend itself to why we say grace or say the blessing over our food or give thanks, or as my granddaddy would say, turn thanks. I don't even know what that meant. We're going to turn thanks. Anybody else heard that terminology, turn thanks? Am I the only one? Okay. I thought it was weird, so apparently it was real weird. Right? So, but this whole giving thanks concept is important. The thing about it is, though, when I'm giving thanks, I'm only giving thanks over enough. I have never, ever in my entire life sat down with 8 folks and 1 chicken leg, closed my eyes to say a prayer, hoping something was going to appear on the table. I've never had that. Anybody in here? No, most of the time when we sit down to eat, we've got more than enough, and we're just thanking God for his provision. But in this case, what Jesus has been handed was not enough, but it doesn't say he begged God for anything. He just gave thanks for what he already had. It should remind us that when we have an abundance and when we have a lack, how did Paul say it? I'm going to be content. I'm going to learn how to be thankful or offer gratitude when it doesn't look like I have very much. And he says, then he took the loaves, gave thanks, and they distributed to the people. Afterward, he did the same with the fish, and they all ate as much as they wanted. Now, I don't know about y'all, how y'all read the Bible, but when I read stories like this, I want to know how that happened. Right? I want to know, think about how they had to feel with the 5 loaves, and they go to the first row. Right? Right? How are we going to make this work? What did that look like? Did they break off a half a loaf, hand it to the first person, and when they look back, they had a whole loaf? I don't know. Did they get it out of a basket, and like the woman who had the oil that never, the vessel that never run dry, did every time they go back to the basket, there was more? I don't know. Did when they passed it to the people and the people took it in their hands, did it grow in their hands? I don't know. But there was more of it when they finished than there was when they started. And I'm just fascinated, like, how does God do that? And the thing is, I don't know how he's going to do it. I don't always know how it's going to work out, but what I do know is that when I put it in his hands, it is limitless, but when I hold it in my hands, it is limited. That's one of the things that we miss. We hold on to stuff, and as long as we hold it, we have limits. But the minute that we hand it to him, it is limitless. There is nothing that he can't do. And our struggle is turning it over because, you know, the boy who had it brought it so he wouldn't be hangry. Right? He brought it so he could feed himself. He didn't go there expecting to feed 3 people, 3,000 people, or 30,000 people. He had no intent that that's how that was going to be used. He had brought him enough so that he wouldn't be hungry, but he was prepared. And when it got in Jesus' hands, all of a sudden, Many people were blessed because it was willing to be used. Most of you in this room, if I were to ask you, what are the problems in the church? What are the problems in the world? What are the problems in the community? What are the problems in society? What are the problems in culture? What are the problems in the country? You could give me a list as long as my arm. But if I was to ask you, what are you going to do about it? Most of your response would be, I don't know. I'm not qualified. I don't have enough. There's nothing I can do. You see, the reality is none of us alone are enough to do anything. But when we take what we have and we put it in the hands of the master and we allow him to use it, there are some incredible things that can take place. When you give him your gifts and your talents and your abilities, listen, sometimes it is just willingness to be useful. I'm going to bet there were other people in that crowd with food. How many of you believe there were 20,000 people there and only this boy had a snack? Now I keep a snack in my backpack, right? Come on. Y'all do too. When you're going, you ain't walking around the Sea of Galilee without some bread. He was the only one, though, willing to turn it over. Right? The reason why we hear about this little boy, the reason why we hear about Andrew holding up his lunch is because he was willing to turn loose of what he had so that it could be used by the master. The question isn't, is this room filled with people who have gifts, talents, and abilities that can be used in the kingdom? The question is, are you going to turn it loose for him to use it? Yes. And sometimes it's not the most qualified person, it's the most available person. As I was preaching the first sermon and I got to this part talking about how people make themselves available, faces started flashing across my mind. But the first one that came to my mind was the church my dad pastored when we were in Wilmington. There was a guy there, his name was Paul Rowell. When my dad got there, they didn't have anybody to lead music. My mom played the piano and she could have led music, and my dad could in a bind. A real tight one, but he could in a bind. I mean, he can hold a tune, but that just, that ain't his thing. But this guy in the church, his name was Paul Rowell. Paul was a service technician for Sears. He drove a service van, and Sears and Roebuck, what it would probably been called then. And but he was a service technician for Sears, and he was a good fisherman. Those are the two things I knew about Paul. Really good fisherman. But he said, I'll do it. Paul wasn't the best singer that ever was. He had never had any music training. He had never had any formal training about notes and scales and harmony and parts. But what he did have was a spirit to be used by God, and he saw a place where he could be useful. And he said, here, Pastor, I'll do it. And he'd get up. He was, the way I say it, he was the one that had guts enough to stand in front of people and tell them what page to turn to, right? But he would get up to sing, and 333 in the Redback Hymnal was his favorite song. That's I'll Fly Away, by the way, if you don't know what that is. But when he would raise his hand, that's all he did. He didn't do a whole lot of directing. But he raised his hand for people to start, and he'd put it down. Boy, people would start singing, and the Spirit of God would fall, and God would use him for his glory and his honor. Were there people in that church that could sing better than him? 100%. Were there people in that church that were more skilled than he was? 100%. But they weren't willing to bring their fish to the game. God cannot bless what you're going to hold on to. He cannot multiply what you're going to keep to yourself. He cannot use for his glory what you're trying to be stingy with. Sometimes you have to say, this isn't enough, and I know it's not enough, but this is what I've got, God, and I'm going to put it in your hands and allow you to use it for your glory and your honor. And I can't always tell you how that's going to work out, but I can tell you that if you will do it, he will use it in ways that you never expected. He will do it. He will use you in ways that you never expected. What you have to do is be willing to say, I know this looks stupid. Think about how ridiculous that looked for Andrew to say, here, I got 5 loaves and 2 fish. But some of you won't sign up, you won't show up, you won't ask, you won't allow God to use you because you're afraid that you're going to look ridiculous if you show up and somebody else has more than you got. No, that's not the deal. Nobody's keeping score that way because none of us, nobody in this room, not single one is enough on their own. The only way you're ever going to be sufficient in the kingdom of God is when you put yourself in His hands and allow Him to use you. Yeah. The rest of the story goes like this. It says, after everyone was full, Jesus told His disciples, now gather the leftovers so nothing is wasted. So they picked up the pieces and filled 12 baskets with scraps left by the people who had eaten from the 5 barley loaves. Every week, the kids have this thing called the bottom line, or today's bottom line. And today's bottom line is this. Use what you have to help others. That's the bottom line of everything that I've got to say today. Use what you have to help others. You see, what you have is enough if you place it in the hands of the Master.